Can't decide if these earrings go or if they're just ridiculous, but I'm wearing them anyway. Hello everybody, my name is Kelsey and we're about to get very, very nerdy with my March wrap-up. So March was a month. I had a very, I guess not overly ambitious TBR, but like I had trouble completing this month's TBR. I did not, if you saw my April TBR, I still didn't. I finished the two that I was in the middle of, but I didn't finish the one that I said I wasn't going to finish. But I also participated in Becca's 48-hour Bookopoly-thon, so I will make sure to go leave that vlog up above and down below. So if you want to go check out the 4 books that I read that weekend, which I will briefly touch on in this video, feel free to. But yeah, it was overall a pretty good month. It was the most I've read all year, and I had very, very good star ratings, and a lot of different genres, a lot of different formats, but we have a lot of books to talk about. I read 13 in March, so let's get right into the stats. Like I said, I read 13 books this month, and that was over 5,373 pages, which is like 2,000 more than last month, so like stellar. And that was over 3 audiobooks, 5 physical books, 2 ebooks, and 3 kind of mixed books. Of those, I had not a variety of age genre because I had 1 middle grade book, 1 YA book, and what was it, 11 adult books? I read so many adult books. My genres were pretty, I guess, all over the place, you could say. Because I read 4 romance books, 2 mystery books, 2 fantasy books, 2 contemporary books, 2 historical fiction, and 1 nonfiction book. And then my star ratings were like the same, because I had 3 5-star books, and then the rest, all 10, were 4 stars, or 4.5 stars. So quite a lot of books to talk about, but I did have an all-time new favorite this month. So let's talk about that, because it was the first one I read. I started off the month reading Crescent City by Sarah J. Maas. I was reading this for the vlog that I put out in the middle of the month, if you want to see that one, which was reading books that were 2020 favorites of some of my favorite booktubers. And this was my pick for Becca in the Books, and it blew me away. I was super nervous because I'd never read a Sarah J. Maas book before going into it. I thought I was really going to like it. She sounded like an author that I would really enjoy, but I had no idea what I was getting into. It's also a chunk of a book. Like, this doesn't look very large compared to like the fact that it is almost 800 pages, but the books are like thin. Like, this reminds me of like Bible paper, like super thin paper like that. But I ended up giving this one 5 stars. I would have given it more if I could have. It was so good. So I will leave that vlog above or down below if you would like to go check out my like super in-depth thoughts. It's the last book in that vlog. You can like skip to the end if you want to see it. But overall, this was great. I had a lot of different feelings throughout this book. Like, I was happy, I was sad, I was crying, I was laughing. I almost threw the book across the room at one point. I like had to put it down because I was so shocked. Like, every emotion I was given through this book, and like, that to me is a great book. It made me have a vast variety of emotions, and it was so good. I absolutely loved this book. It was fantastic. 5 stars. I'm trying to think of anything that I could tell you about this book, beyond the fact that it was great, and I cannot stop talking about it. This is a good kind of first in the series because it opens you up to a brand new world. It's a very urban setting with like a bunch of different people. This reminds me of like something that maybe people who like the Shadowhunter world would like, because it's set in a city, so it's a very kind of modern setting, but the people who live in the city are a vast variety of different type of magical creatures. You've got fairies, you've got werewolves, you have vampires, you have like mer people who live underneath the earth. There are so many more. Sprites, that kind of falls under fairy. Witches, angels, like, you've got everything in this, but they're all kind of like living together. But so it's a very urban setting, but I really enjoyed that because it was different. It's not something that I've read before, and I don't know, like, it was very good, like I said, first in the series, because, like, it answered all of the major questions we had in this book, but there are some overarching, like, world questions and, like, series questions that we don't get answered. So, like, obviously we're gonna need answers for the second one, but, like, I think this wrapped it up in a way that if I had read this a year ago when it first came out, and it's a year later and we're still waiting on the second one that's probably not going to come out for another year, I would have had to wait 2 years, and, like, I could have done that because of all of the major questions I had were answered. Like, it felt like a good wrap-up where I still want answers, and I still want to continue with this series, obviously, but, like, I'm okay waiting because I got all the answers I wanted. Yeah, this was great. This was my first experience with a Sarah J. Maas book. I gushed about this nonstop to everyone who will listen. My best friend, my husband, pretty sure my family has heard me talk about this book. It's incredible. I am pretty sure I'm now a Maas stan. I need to read more of her stuff to, like, confirm that, but, like, this, I'm here for this series. That's, oh, favorite. This, I would not be surprised if it was for sure my favorite of the year. Like, y'all, it was good. The next one that I read was A Duke by Default by Alyssa Cole, which I gave 4 stars to. This is her second in her Reluctant Royals series. I gave this one 4 stars because I really enjoyed this one. It was really cool because, like, we're following the best friend from the first book in this book. Her name's Portia. She's kind of like a party girl in the first book, and in this book she's trying to get her life together, and so she goes to Scotland to intern at a sword making shop, and then the guy who owns the shop actually is a duke, and so, like, she's helping him figure that out, and it's just their relationship. I don't think it's really an age gap between these two, but they make him seem, like, significantly older, because, like, I don't know if you can tell, but in the picture he has, like, kind of, like, salt and pepper hair, and, like, they talk about the fact that he's got salt and pepper hair, so he's older than her, but I'm pretty sure he's still in his 30s, so, like, that was a little questionable. Questionable as in, like, the writing, not the fact that, like, there's an age gap, because, like, there really isn't one, and if there is, it's really not that big. But, like, the way that they wrote him made him sound, like, significantly older, even though he really wasn't. My problem with this book was the ending. It just kind of ended. It had a wrap-up, but it just kind of felt like there were still so many questions I had that weren't answered. I was like, I need to see what's gonna happen because of it. Like, the story can't stop because our main characters are talking again. Like, I need more answers than that. So, like, this needed a couple more chapters added onto it to kind of wrap all of that up, because there was a lot of stuff that I was like, it can't just end like this. Like, there needs to be more, and there wasn't. So, like, the build-up of these two characters I think was great. I love this author's writing. I'm still obsessed with this series and will continue to read stuff by this author, but I just felt like the ending wasn't what I wanted, which is why it only got 4 instead of 5 stars. But still great. Loved seeing the, like, Scottish side of this world, and we'll continue with this. The next one is actually an arc that I read that came out the middle of the month, I think. It's for sure out now, so I would highly recommend going to check that out. If this sounds interesting, I'll leave my Goodreads review. But that is The Dating Plan by Sarah Desai, I think. And this one was just a lot of fun. To me, this is a book, if you like things like Lily Menon or Zendaya Menon or Christina Lauren, like, this would be a book for you. But it follows our main characters, Daisy and Liam, who have had a past. Liam was the best friend of Daisy's brother and was, like, her crush when she was a kid. And, like, there was an issue with them where he kind of stood her up for, like, reasons that we learned throughout the book. And so she's hated him for years. And then they get together, or they, like, run into each other at this convention, and they strike up this fake engagement because he needs to be married for a year in order to have ownership of his grandfather's distillery that was given to him when his grandfather died, and she wants to get her aunts off and her father off her back. So, like, they decide to get married and be married for a year and then divorce. But obviously, kind of like fake engagement, arranged marriage trope, there's gonna be feelings there. So this was really good. It's super steamy, much steamier than I expected it was going to be, which is not a problem. I like the steam, but just know that going into it. If you're someone who likes romance but doesn't like explicit sex scenes, you're gonna have them here. I liked that our main characters had their own issues, and, like, they are not perfect people. They are so imperfect, but they both know that, and like they grow together because of that. I thought their relationship was really believable because of that. It just felt great. This is just a very fun, steamy romance if you like, you know, hate to love tropes, if you like tropes where it's like in a fake engagement, that kind of thing, fake dating, stuff like that. I think you'll really enjoy this. I really enjoyed this. Like I said, if you like Christina Lauren or Zendaya Menon, specifically if you've read her Lily Menon's book, Makeup Breakup, this reminds me a lot of that because they're very in the tech world. She works at a startup company for feminine products, and he works at like a venture capitalist company, I think is what it is. He works at a company like that gives startups money, basically. But it's very like technology based stuff because she is specifically with data and analyst and stuff like that. So it's very techy, but I really enjoyed this book. I decided to start reading it just because I was like, it sounded interesting and like I need to read this arc before it comes out. And I was sucked in and read it within like 2 days. Like, it was so good. But I tell you what, I gave that one 4.5 stars because it was stellar. The next one I read is another really great one. I gave it 5 stars, and that is Never Seduce a Scot by Maya Banks. This book is one that sounded super interesting because I saw my friend Taylor over on Instagram. I'll leave her channel or her account down below because she's great. You should check her out. I talked about her in my April TBR, actually. She had this book on her TBR, and it's about someone who is deaf, but it's set in like a historical Scottish clan kind of world, and so I was like, that sounds super interesting. So I put it on my TBR. She saw that I put it on my TBR, and we ended up buddy reading it, and I put it on there because of her, which just is so perfect. And so we ended up reading this one together. We read it in a week, and I had to legit stop myself. Like, I charted out how many pages I needed to read a day. Like, we decided how many we needed, and I like charted out when to stop, because if I didn't, I would have plowed through this book in a day. It's so much fun. I have forgotten how much I love just these fun historical romance stories. And like, this main character, I want to be best friends with her. I want to be her. She's incredible. Basically, this book is the first of a series of kind of companion novels, but it's the series. It's called The Armstrongs and the Montgomerys. And this one follows our two main characters, each from, one of them is an Armstrong, one of them is a Montgomery. And these two clans hate each other. They've been at war for literal years. And the king has decided that he is done with this. He does not need them to have this issue. Like, they're just, no. He's like, we're done. So he declares that the daughter of the Armstrong laird is going to marry the laird of the Montgomerys. So Evelyn is the daughter, and she is deaf. She had an accident when she was super young, and she cannot hear. And like, no one knows that she is deaf. She just kind of plays the idiot for reasons that you find out while you're reading. So she marries the laird, whose name is Graham, and she's thrust into this world of people who despise her because of her last name. She's had nothing to do with this feud. She just happens to have been born to this clan. And so it's the two of them being married and falling for one another, and it's super cute. And like I said, she is a super strong main character because she can make people understand her because she can read lips. And so like, she can understand what's kind of going on if people like speak to her directly, but if she doesn't see their lips moving, she can't understand them, which is why people think that she's super daft. But she's actually like super brilliant, and like, she's super strong-willed. She stands up for what she like believes is right. She won't stand for people like bad-mouthing her when she figures kind of what's going on. And just seeing the two of them grow together, seeing the clans grow together, it was just so much fun. And it was so much fun reading it with someone else. Like, buddy reading with Taylor was just so much fun. So we're reading the second one in the series next month, and I am ecstatic. It follows one of the brothers of one of our main characters. I don't remember which one. But I gave it 5 stars because I couldn't put it down. I had to force myself to put it down, otherwise I would have just devoured it. The next one I picked up was Everything Everything by Nicole Yoon, which I read for my lovely friend Teresa Love. I'll leave her channel down below. But this one is one that she just loves this book. This follows our main character Maddie, who has always lived in the house. She's allergic to everything, and so she basically lives in her little house bubble and can't be friends with anybody, and then a boy moves in next door, and they kind of strike up a friendship. That turns into a romance. And it's everything that comes from that. I've seen the movie, and I've wanted to read the book to see kind of like how it compares to the movie. It's pretty, I would say it's a pretty accurate representation, or a pretty accurate adaptation as far as what I can remember from the movie goes. But this book is written so well because you've got like your normal prose, but then you've also got like text messages between our characters, and you've got like random internet searches that she's done, and then there are definitely pictures throughout this book. So it's a mixed media book, and I loved my time reading this because it's all from Maddie's perspective. And I think it's interesting because what I've heard my friend Teresa talk about, which I've said before on this channel, is that she compares this to how it feels to be chronically ill, because she is chronically ill, and like this is a very good representation for like her life, and just seeing that, just getting a little glimpse into what it's like to never leave your house because of, you know, X, Y, and Z reason, and get like a little bit better knowledge of like kind of what my friend goes through, I think was really impactful to me. And like this is super cute. This is like prime YA romance with like a whole twisty end of a book, which like I knew coming because of the movie, but it still surprises me to this day, like that's how it ended. And I don't know, it's fascinating. And I think if you like that idea of like watching this girl try to have a normal life when she really can't, and just kind of getting a look at that, I think this is a really good book to read. I gave it 4 stars. It was still super cute, and I loved our main characters, and it was great. So I really did love this book. So Nicole Yoon is definitely an author for me, and I'm excited to see what other things she has coming out, because I know she's got a new one coming out this year that I'm super excited about. But yeah, this is a really great experience. It was super quick to get through, and I loved every second of it. The next one is one that like I'm so conflicted by, because I gave it 4 stars because the beginning and the end were great, but the middle was so not fun. And that is Dragonfly and Amber by Diana Gabaldon. This is the second in her Outlander series. I really enjoyed it. Like I said, the beginning was super interesting because it's kind of this whole book is kind of a let me tell you a story about my past kind of thing. You start off with our main character at the beginning, kind of many years in the future, and then she's telling the story, and that's what this book is. But like the ending was fascinating, the beginning was fascinating, but like most of this book takes place in France in kind of the time of like the Jacobite rebellion in Scotland, like when King Charles, I think his name is, was trying to get like, or maybe it's King James, was trying to get like people on his side to be like the rightful king. And it was just really long and really boring for me. Like I was reading it and I just wanted it to be over. So I think I've decided that I love this series, I love the characters. For me, books like this are not the best, because in the middle, like even though interesting things are happening, I am bored out of my mind because I want to be done with it because it is such a big book. So like her series, I need to take my time reading. Like I need to read a book, read like half of it 1 month, give myself a break, and then come back and read the second half, because like there is a huge cliffhanger in this one that like I need answers to with the third book. And like there are 8 books that I own. I'm sure I think there's a 9th one that just came out, and they all get bigger each time. So yeah, we'll see when I continue with this series. It's not super high on my TBR, but I do enjoy these characters. I do love watching Claire and Jamie's love story. It just took a while to get through. And that happens. So that's why it was 4 stars. But I did enjoy it. I did like seeing, like I said, their relationship. I liked seeing the historical fiction aspects of it. And yeah, it was really, really interesting. There's not a lot I can say about it because it is the second in a series. But if you don't know, the Outlander series follows our main character, Claire, who somehow gets sent back in time to 1743 Scotland, where she meets a guy named Jamie, and she has a love romance with him. And it's her surviving in Scotland at the time, and then this one just follows on from the events of the first book. So not my favorite. I still give it 4 stars, like I said, but yeah, it was just kind of okay. The next book I read was another ebook that I received from the publisher. It wasn't an e-arc. This book came out a couple of years ago, and that is The Crowns of Croswald by D.E. Knight. This is the first in the Crowns of Croswald series. The first and the second ones are out. I do actually have the second one, which I do need to read at some point, and the third one is coming out near the end of this year. But it takes place in this world where basically there's magic. It's a fantastical world, and there's this evil queen that's kind of in charge of everything. And you have two types of people. You have like the royal people, and then you have scriveners. And scriveners are people who do magic via pens. And the pen can create magic, and so they can do spells with the pens. They can write down history. They have photographic memories, that kind of thing. And they work for royalty. And it's basically like a giant wizard, but instead of having a wand, you have a quill, and like that's where your power comes from. And this follows our main character, Ivy, who is a maid in a house and like has been an orphan, doesn't really know her story, and somehow gets sent to a magic school to learn the art of scrivening. And so it's her first year in this school, and she's kind of discovering it. It's your normal like first year magic school stuff, but it's also got like magic school and chosen one tropes within this book. So there's a lot of tropes that are not original, but if you like those things, then this is your book. But I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars because it took me a little bit of time to get into it. I wasn't really invested until like probably close to halfway through the book, and then I was like, okay, now I want to know what's happening, because there's kind of like a mystery surrounding Ivy's life and her past, and just some bizarre things that are happening in the school, and that really starts to kick off close, like a little bit before halfway. It has a very like the magic system is really fascinating to me. It's a little confusing at times, but kind of once you understand what's going on, it makes a lot more sense. And I love seeing Ivy like create friends throughout this book, and I'm curious to see where her story goes from here. So this is the first book that I read for Becca's Bookopoly-thon, so like I said, I will leave the vlog for that above if you want to see like more in-depth thoughts. But this was a good book. I have a review on Goodreads, so go check that out. But yeah, it was pretty decent. And then the next one I read for that was Once Ghosted, Twice Shy, which is a novella in the Reluctant Royals series by Alyssa Cole. This follows Lakotsi, who is the advisor to the prince in the first book. And in the first book, you're watching our prince's love story, but you also have like her have a side love story, and so like you're kind of learning about it, but not really, and then it doesn't end well. And so this is what happens when they come back to New York after the events of the first book, and she meets up with this girl again that she's had this love story with, and we get dual timelines. We get timelines from when they meet the first time during the events of the first book, and this second timeline. And it's super cute. It's super thin. I gave it 4 stars. It's a book that like you wouldn't like if you didn't already have connections to these characters, which makes sense. You probably wouldn't have read this short book if you hadn't have read the series, because it's part of the series. And they say to read it after the second book, but I think you can read it after the first book, no problem. But yeah, it's a cute novella about 2 women falling in love. It's kind of like a second chance romance a little bit in this book. So if any of that sounds good, I highly recommend. If you like Alyssa Cole's writing, I highly recommend. It was a very cute love story, and I loved seeing them because I was super curious in the first book, like what was going to happen, but I knew we were going to get answers in this one. So I'm so glad we got our answers. The next one is Volume 1 of My Husband's Brother by Jingoro Tagame. This is the first in a 2-part manga series that follows our main character who lives in Tokyo with his daughter. And his brother I think has been dead for about a year before this book starts, but his brother is gay and lived in the US or Canada. I think it's Canada. And he just didn't really know a lot about his brother, didn't really talk to his brother too much. And then his brother's husband comes to visit to kind of get an idea of his husband's world, his husband's culture, and so he stays with the brother and his kid. And this guy's just watching his kid react to someone who's gay. She's never met anyone who's gay before, and she hasn't grown up with all that prejudice kind of put on her. And so he's just kind of watching his kid be totally cool with this guy, and is kind of rethinking what he thinks about gay people, and if he was actually as supportive as a brother as he thought he was, or didn't think he was, you know, that kind of stuff. But I really enjoyed this. I gave it 4 stars. I loved seeing our main characters' kind of ideas about the brother change. I liked seeing, I don't know, like their little family of the 3 of them that they have created in this book is so cute, and it's just very eye-opening. And also they're dealing with grief because they're both grieving this brother/husband that they know. And yeah, it's just really interesting seeing them together. The next and last book that I read in my 48-hour Bookathon weekend was Nikki Heat by Richard Castle. This is a book that's based on a TV show. I kind of explained it in that video, but for people who are not aware, Castle is a TV show, or was a TV show that was on ABC that followed this guy named Richard Castle, who is a crime mystery novelist, and he runs into this NYPD detective called Kate Beckett, and he was just fascinated by her, so he followed her around on cases and wrote the Nikki Heat series about her. So she is the basis for our main character here, who is an NYPD detective. And so this is just the first in like 4 or 5 books that have actually all been turned into books, but he writes this series during the show. My favorite part about this is that even in the back, like, this is Nathan Fillion, who plays Richard Castle in the TV show, and like that's the picture they have. They went all out with this book. But this is, I think I gave this one 4 stars. This is an okay book. Like, as objectively just thinking about this crime book, it follows basically what I interpret as like just one episode where like they're solving one crime, and like seeing them figure it out was very fascinating because we follow the NYPD detective, a couple of the other detectives in this unit, and then the Castle character is a journalist who is there kind of investigating with Nikki Heat as he writes an expose on Nikki Heat and on the NYPD. So like as a book, as like this story, it's just okay, but because I have connection to the TV show, and because like there are other side characters in the TV show that have like characters in this book and kind of show up in this book, and you can see, oh, that's supposed to be this person from the TV show, I gave this 4 stars because I have that connection. I think you have to have that connection to actually enjoy this book. So there's nothing amazing about the writing, it's really just an okay story, but with that connection, I enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. Yeah, I love the TV show. And it was just kind of cool to be able to read a book from the TV show that Richard Castle has written. Which is kind of cool. So the next one I read was A Phantom of Pemberton, a Pride and Prejudice murder mystery by Regina Jeffers. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. This is just super dark. Like, this is a dark story. Due to like some weird snow weather, a bunch of random people get stuck at Pemberley. You have obviously Darcy and Lizzie there. You've got Lydia who comes to visit. Georgiana is there. You have Catherine and Anderberg who come visit. And then just like a bunch of random people. This guy and his mistress are there. This other woman who just happened to be traveling with Lydia is there. Like, all these people just get stranded there. And it was really fascinating to see what it's like for Lizzie and Darcy to be married, what it's like for this author to kind of have re-envisioned a little bit of Georgiana and Anne. They definitely have quite a lot more of characters within this book, specifically Anne. Anne kind of becomes her own person in this book, and it's just beautiful to see her as a person. So it's really interesting to see all these characters, but it's like super dark because like at times during this book, it's in 3rd person, but it's like 3rd person, I don't remember the word, but like when you're in someone's head. But then at some point you're actually in like the villain's head, and it is super dark there. Like super dark. And like I would give so many trigger warnings for this book of like normal murder stuff, but also like if you don't like blood, this is rough at the end. If you have aversions to like specific mental illnesses, because there's one that's talked about a lot in here, which is multiple personality disorder. And I'm not entirely sure it's handled well. I have no experience. I have no idea. But it's an interesting plot device that is used. Hello.
Weird.
Chris read it. So it's an interesting book. It's a very bizarre ending. I'm not even quite sure what I think about it. But I enjoyed my time reading it, I guess is the best way to describe it. Like, I really don't have an opinion because I can't really explain to you what this book is about because it's so bizarre. But if you like murder mysteries that are slightly revolving around classic characters from Jane Austen that you enjoy, I would give it a shot. Just know that it gets dark. I'm glad that I read it. It's not my favorite, kind of like something that's based on a Jane Austen work, but it's definitely an interesting take. So, yeah, I don't know. I still gave it 4 stars because, like, I enjoyed it, but I had a weird enjoyment of it. Does that make sense? Because, like, yeah. The next book that I ended up picking up was Daughters of the Winter Queen by Nancy Goldstone. So this is a nonfiction book that follows the descendants of Mary Queen of Scots. So the Winter Queen was the nickname that they gave Elizabeth Stuart, who was the granddaughter of Mary Queen of Scots. So the Winter Queen, it was the name that they gave to Elizabeth because she and her husband were basically trying to become the crowned rulers of Bohemia, I really want to say it was, and they only lasted for a winter season. They only ruled for a winter season, and that's why they called her the Winter Queen. And so it's her and her 4 daughters, and it's just an exploration of all of these people and their lives. This I ended up giving 4 stars to. I loved this a lot. I really feel like I got a lot of information about these women, but I didn't like it as much as the Rival Queens that I read by Nancy Goldstone last year. And I think that's because there was just too much happening. The other book followed 2 people, and then it was their lives and all the people who intersected in their lives, but it was mainly focused on 2 people. This focuses on 5 different people, and it flips back and forth. So the first third of the book follows the Winter Queen, kind of giving you a little bit about her life. And then after that, you kind of start to get her kids' lives, because she gave birth to 14 different kids. Most boys. There were only 4 girls that survived to adulthood, I think it is. But she gave birth to so many people. So you had to kind of give her history at first, and that was super interesting. But when she started talking about her kids, she had way too many for me to really focus on it. And if you were not 100% focused on this book, you missed something. And I think that was my problem. I think there was a disconnect problem with myself and the audiobook that I was listening to with this. I'm not sure if I gave it my full attention when I should have, but at the same time, there was just too much going on with this story. So this is definitely worth a reread in my opinion, because it is fascinating. I loved her writing style, just like I did with the first one. It's very digestible. It's very easy to understand what's going on. You just have to focus on this book. So I enjoyed this quite a lot. I got what I wanted out of it, mostly. I just think that the other one was better, and I'm super curious to see what other things this author has. I know she's got a new book coming out about Marie Antoinette, her sisters and her mother, their kind of world, and that's about, I think that's 4 characters, so maybe that one will be easier to go to. I know she's got a book about Joan of Arc, which is 1 person, so maybe the fact that there's a lot of people she was focusing on was confusing to me. But I also probably didn't give it as much attention as it deserved, and that one's on me. So I still really enjoyed this. I still gave it 4 stars, but by the end I was I think I want to be done with this. So I thought that it was good. And the very last book that I read in the month of March was The Last Memoirs of Jane Austen by Sheree James. So I thought this was going to be a 5-star. It ended up being a 4.5 star because I still really enjoyed this book, but there are definitely some problems I have with this. So this is a historical fiction book that is written as if we have found some memoirs of Jane Austen, and this is just the first chunk of them, where we're really focused on Jane Austen's earlier years, where she is trying to publish one of her first books. So in the course of this book, we see her revising Sense and Sensibility and sending it off to a publisher, and then she starts working on Pride and Prejudice to revise that one as well. So we see her early publishing kind of career, but this mainly focuses on what if Jane Austen had a giant love story, because there's about 2 years in her life where there are no letters between her and her sister Cassandra. She stopped writing completely. She didn't even revise stuff. She just didn't write for 2 years. And so this is kind of an exploration of okay, but what if she did? Because there is knowledge of when Jane Austen died, Cassandra burnt a ton of different letters. And so there's a good chunk of Jane Austen's life that we don't know about, because Jane Austen or Cassandra didn't want us to know about that. And so this is Sheree James's take on what if she had a love story and it didn't quite work out? That would make sense why they would have burned all those letters. And so this is her take on that. And I think it was really cool to see Jane Austen as a young girl, kind of young as in early 30s, trying to get and kind of fall in love. And then obviously you go into this knowing that it's not going to end well, because Jane Austen never married. And so I thought this was really fascinating. I thought it was very well researched, kind of like Sir James's other work, The Missing Manuscript of Jane Austen. My problem was mostly the writing with this book. This book came out in 2008, whereas The Missing Manuscripts came out in 2012. So this came out first, and I feel like the writing, as far as pretending to be Jane Austen in the other book, was much better than this one. It didn't really feel like her writing. It didn't really feel as polished as the other one did. She kind of sounded like a silly young girl for most of this book, which I guess would make sense when she is kind of younger and she is kind of falling in love, which makes you do like different things and you kind of act younger sometimes. It just kind of felt really girlish to me to be Jane Austen, and I don't know, it just didn't sound like her. And there's a lot of stuff in here that you can see, specifically if you've read A Sense and Sensibility and Pride and Prejudice, you see a bunch of nods in this book to those books, because like the author is basically insinuating that a lot of stuff that happened in Jane Austen's life she used in her books. So you're seeing a lot of the same situations that kind of happen to some of our heroines. Also, I feel like you know her writing really well. You can see some words and some sentences that people have used that like you can clue in and go, oh, well that sentence was sort of used in the end of X, Y, and Z book. And it's kind of cool seeing all of those nods, but it just didn't really feel like her writing. I feel like there was a very big disconnect from the dialogue in this book to like the prose in this book, because the dialogue felt like older Jane Austen style writing, whereas the prose portions, or like the narration portions, really just felt too modernized to be actually Jane Austen writing this. I think it was just a mixture of this was written before the other book and I had read the other book first and really liked that one, and I think it was like very well polished, and this was her before she was super well polished. But I think her research is incredible. I loved getting to look at Jane Austen and kind of imagine what would have happened if Jane Austen did have a love story. And just all of these things that like we probably have questions about Jane Austen, we get somewhat answers in this book. And I just think it's super fascinating. So I did really enjoy this one. Like I said, I gave it 4.5 stars, but there were some things that like I didn't like as much. So I was, to this book's credit, I did come in with a little bit of a disadvantage because the other one was so good. Like I couldn't find anything wrong with that one. So like having an almost perfect book and then having a book that she wrote before that, obviously her writing's not going to be the same, but still really good, still enjoyed it. Not quite 5 stars, but as close as you can get without being 5 stars. So I did end off the month with a pretty decent read. And that's it. Those are the 13 books that I read in the month of March. I'd love to know if you read any of the books that I have mentioned here today, or if there was a book that you read in March that was just incredible and you want to shout it to the world. I've talked enough about Crescent City. I feel like the world knows how I feel about that. So I would love to know what your favorite, like your new favorite book is. But if you like this video, and I very much hope that you did, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up and subscribe down below if you want to be part of this awesome growing family. I've also got all my social media down there, as well as other fun bookish links, so don't forget to go check all of those out. And I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye!